You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and friends, you might think that I flaked on you last week. 2 weeks ago, I released the episode on what we can learn about friendship from the Beastie Boys, and then nothing. What's up with that, Alysa? Yes, I'm talking in third person. But it made me think about flakiness and friendship. How do we view it, what causes it, and what we can do about it? So that's what we're going to explore in today's episode. Now, you may be wondering, why is this so important now when we're isolated from our friends? First, let's not be naive and think that we can't cancel and flake on people virtually. Second, this might be a good time to reflect on perhaps our flaky ways or how we might handle such friends who frequently cancel when we are in a safer space to get back together. So, what does it mean to be flaky? Being flaky is often seen as problematic behavior and a quality with a nasty reputation. For example, if you Google quotes about being flaky, you'd get a number of those sarcastically fun e-cards like, quote, "Sorry, I forgot we're only friends when it's convenient for you," end quote. Quote, "Thank you for being my flaky, inconsiderate friend who never comes through and bails on everything," end quote. And then finally, quote, "Head and Shoulders should make a product for getting rid of flaky people too," end quote. Kira Astrian, in a 2015 Psychology Today article, defines flakiness as, quote, "generally meaning having a habit of canceling plans shortly before said plans are about to begin. It is a trend generally attributed to people's overscheduled lives, conflicting commitments, and constant access to each other through personal technology, or a combination of all three," end quote. She talks about how easy it is now to cancel because we can shoot a friend a quick text and maybe like a funny gif, like "don't hate me," rain check, or any of those sorts of things. It's super easy to do that now. We don't have to necessarily call someone on the phone and break the news that we can't make the plans. But we've all been flakies and flakers, am I right? So are we all drowning in the same pool of disrespect that seems just to be a little bit more socially acceptable than it should be? We can cancel plans on our friends because they'll forgive us, right? Definitions of flaky, although sometimes being associated with spontaneous folks or being a free spirit, is primarily viewed as being unreliable, lazy, inconsiderate, and even dishonest. According to a blog post by Ben Ofana on his webpage, he puts into great detail the problem with being flaky, including specifically that flaky friends are liars. Perhaps it's a little harsh. Do people make plans with friends knowing they'll cancel later? Absolutely. Do people wholeheartedly agree to make plans because they're excited to see their friends but later have the need or the have to cancel, right? They have that feeling. Yes, this happens too. So I'm not sure we're all quote unquote liars. Like, I mean, we all are, right? Like, we all tell white lies and things like that, right? But we're not necessarily liars in the sense that we are purposely trying to hurt others. But of course, there are toxic folks who try to manipulate and control others. And there is an idea of self-deception in which we may be unconsciously rationalizing our own behaviors and maybe not entirely aware of the deception that we might be participating in. When it comes down to it, though, is being flaky a deal breaker? Are flaky friends worth flaking on? Or could there potentially be something else that's going on with our flaky friends? So it seems particularly important to talk about the reasons why we flake. According to an article on Medium by Chrysler Cuba from July 23, 2018, the author talks about essentially experiencing a high when agreeing to make plans with friends. Now, I can relate to this, especially considering we're in quarantine now. Like, how many of you talked with friends about the first thing you might do once it's safer to do so, right? Like, okay, first we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then, and that's just perhaps one friend. But imagine when we have a safer space to visit friends face to face, how overwhelming it might be for some after being quarantined for so long. I can see many plans getting canceled because simply it might just be difficult for some to go from such isolation to full-on interaction. However, let's think about life before quarantine. getting that same high when making plans. You run into a friend you enjoy being around and you haven't seen each other in a while, so you make plans to get coffee, drinks, food, whatever the case might be, but then later that week you end up canceling. A number of the sources that will be used here in this episode highlights the idea that although flakiness is often considered to be rude, frustrating, and disrespectful, that we may need to look beyond the initial negativity to see what's really going on. So let's go through some of the main causes. First, as noted by Cuba, one reason people flake is the high of the moment to make plans, and that high essentially goes away, right? You're high in the moment, and then later you're like, I'm not as excited anymore. And a Bustle article by Marissa Higgins from May 2016 states, quote, basically, it's easy to commit yourself to whatever sounds good in the moment if you have no idea what else you've committed yourself to for the rest of the week, much less the specific date this person is talking to you about in the first place, end quote. So it's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Like, how many of you are like, yeah, and then later you're like, oh, no, I can't do that. That's not going to work. Or you're like, oh, that sounded like something fun to do on Tuesday, but you know what? Friday afternoon for Friday evening doesn't sound fun anymore. The second cause comes from Marissa Higgins, which is in the same article. And she talks about flaky friends all having one thing in common, and that is saying yes. Flaky folks are yes people. And there could be lots of reasons why they could say yes, right? Some people might feel pressured to say yes. Some people just can't say no, right? We have to remember that no is a complete sentence. No, period, right? There it is. No, period, right? But I mean, that doesn't mean it's easy to do, but that's what we need to remember. We don't have to give excuses. We don't have to feel bad for saying no. It's just a no. Some of the other things that she talked about in terms of reasons why people might say yes is wanting to avoid conflict or some awkwardness in that social situation. Like, oh, there's a group of people around. I don't want to make them feel bad, but then I'll make them feel bad later, right? Some of those people are perfectionists and people pleasers. Friends, don't forget, though, that I have done an episode on people pleasers with the wonderful Ashley from Making It Modern podcast. So if you want to hear more about that topic and you might have missed out on that episode or want to have a re-listen, I linked that episode in show notes so that you can have easy access to listen to me and Ashley talk about being the people pleasers that we are. So, but it makes sense that people pleasers would say yes, right? They say yes as a way to please in the moment, but then cannot or may not be able to follow through. Folks that also say yes tend to be perfectionists, and this one seems like a personal attack on this host. I've got a tad bit of perfectionism, if you will, and this article talks about perfectionists bailing because they're afraid the plans won't go according to plan, or they can't make it perfect, or they want to avoid making a mistake, or they're afraid of letting someone down, so they flake. And this reminds me of, because I am a perfectionist, it's not something that I always realized in myself until I was on the phone with my father a few years ago. And he goes, well, you know, you are a perfectionist. And I was like, what? No, I did not know that. But then as I learned more about it, it's like, yeah, you got me. I am a perfectionist. And so I wanted to give an example of where my perfectionism really got in the way of a social situation that I could see myself trying to avoid because I don't want it to happen again. So one of my favorite podcasts, spoiler alert, in case you haven't listened to all 117 episodes in which I talk about the Dollop, but one of my favorite podcasts is the Dollop, which is a history comedy podcast hosted by Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds. And I love the podcast. I've seen them live a number of times. And in November of 2018, I got all my friends together. Let's go to Detroit and see them live. I got front row seats. We'd meet them after, all this kind of, it's supposed to be a fun night. And I was just so nervous about it going right the whole time that I don't even remember what the story was about that they were telling, right? They tell a history story, Dave does, and then Gareth responds to it. I don't even remember what it was because I wasn't having any fun. And so I think that we should remember that for some people, you think, oh, just have fun. Sometimes having fun is hard when you have all these other things going on. So I really feel like I might have ruined the night for my friends by being concerned about the time and where we're eating and just getting to our seats and like I seriously don't remember even laughing during the show, and it's one of the funniest podcasts that I've heard. So that is just an example of how perfectionists might avoid a situation like that so that they don't have to worry about all the things that could go wrong. A third cause comes from Psychology Today in 2015 from Kira Astrian, which brings up excellent points about anxiety and depression. Folks who have social anxiety might be more introverted and or are highly sensitive people may be more likely to make and cancel plans. And as someone who has anxiety and has the high scores high on highly sensitive, um, feelings, that it goes into the idea that we have difficulty having fun. And so the article talks about, quote, I couldn't bring myself to do all the work of having fun, end quote. So sometimes we're too down, we're too anxious, we're highly sensitive, and so it makes it very difficult to pull it together to then be social in a situation. So some of our friends, even ourselves, may be experiencing anxiety or feeling down, which makes it really hard to see one being able to enjoy themselves or being able to contribute to the fun. And I'm sure a lot of us are like, well, we might as well not be there because we don't want to end up ruining the time for everyone else. So the fourth cause is, we simply have busy lives, and life happens even when we may not want it to, am I right? And I'm talking to you specifically, COVID-19 and the flood in Midland, Michigan happening right now. Shout out to all of my local friends in Midland. If you're not aware, the town just 20 minutes away from me is their dams have failed. And so just want to say that's the point. Like, life happens, things happen. These are two major things, a tragedy within a pandemic, but just think about the daily like ups and downs of life that happen. And we also have to consider that we are part of, especially in America. Now, my friends that are international, you might have more of a leisure focus in your culture, but America is certainly a culture of busyness, right? According to Joe Pinksker from The Atlantic in 2017, we live more in a world that focuses on, quote, seeming busy and where, quote, work is praised. So we find ourselves too busy for plans, so then we have to cancel them. Because being busy may be a badge of honor or status. We end up overscheduling ourselves right out of the leisure and fun we probably need in our lives, the time that we need to have to make connections with other people because we're too busy. We got all these things that we have to do. But I think it's important to note that sometimes we have busier times of year or life is just busier at some point. So although we live in this culture, perhaps where busyness is seen as something that's attractive or we're trying to achieve, and getting praise for being so busy, that to me is toxic, right? We need to have both work and leisure in our life. We need to have the connections with our friends and family and other loved ones. And otherwise, though, we do have to keep in mind that there are some times that are just busy, right? Around the holidays, everyone's probably a little bit busier trying to manage all the things that are going on. And I can certainly tell you that students, professors, and university staff are busier during finals week. Sometimes the flaking makes sense, right? You might even not consider it flaking. You might just be like, we'll get you next time. You're stressed, right? And then the next time you might be stressed and you figure it out as friends. But sometimes that's why people cancel, is because life is happening. Sometimes life is happening for all of us, like being in quarantine, or life is happening to some of us on that particular day and time, right? The fifth cause is that some folks are disorganized and forgetful about their plans, tasks, and responsibilities. And I have to admit, this is something that happened recently that I committed, if you will, and made me think about this topic as well, because I have a dear friend who is going to have a party for her birthday and her daughter and her husband, and it was going to be combined, and then it ended up moving virtually because of the quarantine. And I messaged her on Marco Polo that morning and was like, oh my gosh, your virtual party is today. I need to put a note in my phone to remind myself. And then I got off Marco Polo, and guess what I didn't do? Put an alarm, and then I completely forgot. And I could make excuses like, well, it's the end of the semester, and, my brain is fried from teaching remotely online. But to be honest, I'm sometimes disorganized about the things that I need to do, which is probably why I think that I can pack the night before, like right before, sometimes the day of a trip, right? Going to Paris 2 years ago, and I'm packing like the day of, like, what do I need? What? Why are you like this? Alysa, why are you the way that you are? Okay. But in this article by CNN in 2014, they cited Stephen Berglas, and he talks about poor management, specifically thinking that people think they can do everything, that we overestimate our abilities. And my hand is raised in the air because I am completely guilty of this. Rewind and hear example from like 30 seconds ago when I think I can pack for an international trip right before I'm leaving, which leaves me forgetful. It leaves me rushing, and it's nothing I'm proud of, that's for sure. And I know a lot of people are like, you haven't packed yet? That should be a sign that I'm probably doing it wrong. Cause number 6 comes from a 2015 Rookie Magazine article. And in this article, Krista Burton writes about how many folks may just not be interested and make plans perhaps to be nice. And how many of you have had this situation, though, where both friends are wanting to cancel and you find yourselves on the same page. And so you call your friend, or you're like, hey, can we cancel this Saturday? And you like feel bad, and they're like, oh my God, I was hoping you'd want to cancel. And like you high five, and then you're like, yes, rain check. We're on the same page. We are kindred spirits who both wanted to cancel these plans at the same time. That happens, right? That the interest level or the busyness that we were talking about before comes into play. However, other times, as Chrysler Kuba noted, sometimes people just don't want to hang out with us. And that's a big old ouch, right? The rejection. But sometimes we might not be a good fit as friends. Maybe they come across as needy or not respecting a daily responsibilities or have no boundaries. And so it's like, no, thank you. I don't want to hang out with you. But maybe I didn't know how to say no before. So now I'm going to cancel these plans. And I know that, that's extremely hurtful. Even if it is someone who's interested in hanging out with you and they cancel, it can be very hurtful. But one of the things that we have to remember is think about all the people in the world. We're all not going to like each other and get along, and we can't be friends with everyone. We just don't have the time. And sometimes, although it can bring a lot of pain and we might not understand it, that some people might not be made to be friends, or maybe it's just not working out at this particular time, or maybe it's time to move on or update the relationship in some way. And then the final cause is some folks are just self-involved and they have no concept of other people's time except their own. But let's be real. As I said, being canceled can hurt. We can feel rejected. We can miss out on the fun plans that were set because that person has left us hanging. And if it happens so consistently, it might make you question the friendship to begin with. There may be a number of reasons why people flake, and some make much sense, but even unintentional flaking can be hurtful. So what can we do? And I think that there's 2 ways to approach this, including from the point of view of the flaky and the flaker. I'm sure these words exist, and even if they don't, we're making them exist here today. So if you're the flaky, meaning you've been flaked on, you've been left in the lurch, you've been canceled last minute, here are some ideas. First, the Medium article by Cuba suggests giving a specific place, day, and activity for the friend, because that might help cut down on flaking if you really narrow it down, besides having like vague plans. You want something more concrete. It doesn't mean they might not be canceled, but vague plans might be more likely to be canceled. In some cases, we might even be able to work around the flakiness, like inviting several people so you don't miss out on an event. So there's some things that we might just adjust to kind of work with that flakiness. Because here's the thing. We all have qualities. We all have traits. Some of those traits are attractive and cute and adorable. And some of those traits are like, God, that's annoying. And flakiness for some people might be on the, God, that's annoying. But that doesn't mean necessarily for some people that is the deal breaker for them. They're just like, that's my friend and I love them. But what can I do to sort of manage the frustration on my end and help them not to flake on me? Second, Kira Ashrian, among other sources, suggests approaching the situation with compassion because flakiness might not always be what we think it is. So it might be important to ask, what's really going on in my friend's life? And like Sarah Ratchford offers from a Medium article in 2017, check in with friends without making them feel defensive. Asking why can often make people feel defensive. So instead, it might be more useful to say something like, I've noticed you haven't been up for hanging out. Is everything okay? It certainly may lead to a conversation like discussing options for compromises and more. Third, that leads to a more direct tip of communicating with a friend about how you're feeling and how the flakiness is impacting you. So you can talk to them directly and give specific accounts of that because they might not be aware of it. Fourth, you can also reflect on the friendship with some questions from WikiHow webpage. First, did they arrive late? How long do they take to reply to messages? Is it habitual and consistent? Is it always when the event doesn't seem to benefit them? Do they struggle to keep up with responsibilities? Do they forget important things? And then, why do you want to be friends with this person? Now, the WikiHow article talks about how you can like keep track of it on a piece of paper and stuff like that. And I don't know if you need to go that far. We're not doing an investigation. I've been watching Dexter. We're not part of the Miami Police Department, okay? I don't think we need to do all that, but we can consider, like, how many times has this happened? Does this seem to be consistent? Meaning it's the person and not you specifically, and sometimes people are just that way, right? People are on their own time, and you just tell them a different time so they show up on time, right? Or is it specifically an event that has nothing to do with them, so they're more likely to cancel on it, right? You can do sort of this running assessment in your head and figure out where you want to go from there, how you feel about everything. But the WikiHow also talks about fifth, how you can show appreciation when the friend does follow through so that there is that positive reinforcement for letting them know that you appreciate them being there, that this means a lot to you. Sixth, a second Psychology Today article by Levine from 2011 gives 3 options for the flaky, including maintaining the relationship by modifying one's expectations, right? This is the idea. It's like, this person is always going to be late. So if they're always a half an hour late and I'm there at 12 and they show up at 12:30, then maybe I'll tell them 11:30 so they show up at 12, right? Again, people sometimes are on their own time. You might not be able to change anything. They're not specifically making it personal against you. It might just be the way that they are. And if you still want to be friends with them, you can modify those expectations. The second option that Levine talks about is talking to the friend directly, as we've already mentioned. And then finally, the third option is perhaps considering ending the friendship, and maybe reflecting on those questions from WikiHow can help us decide if this is someone who might be manipulating us or rejecting us on purpose in some way that is meant to be harmful and hurtful. Or we could decide, like, okay, this is their cute little quality that is super annoying. But seventh, I like this quote by Stephen Berglis, who is quoted by CNN. Quote, "Flaky friends, like good wine, often improve with time." End quote. Some people may never change, but others may need time to figure it out. And they do. So give them some time to grow, especially if you're in your teens or early 20s. Some of those things might be figured out all along. And if you're like, damn it, I'm 40 or 50, people can still figure things out. You might need to give them that time, nurture, let them grow, but give them some water and some sunshine. Cultivate, right? And then finally, we do not have to remain in friendships that are toxic, where a supposed friend is wasting our time by showing up only when it's convenient for them, disrespecting our time, knowing that they are showing up late for your most important day in life. Whatever the case is, we do not have to remain friends. And that is probably decisions that we don't always make lightly, and that's okay. But don't force ourselves into a situation where our well-being is then compromised, because our well-being should be first. So to look at it from the other point of view, we've all been flakers, maybe some more than others, and some things we can include in terms of ideas might be being self-aware. So that's the first one that Cuba states from Medium. Are you canceling on your friends? Why are you canceling on them? Keep in mind that being flaked on can be hurtful and dismissive, and that essentially you are hurting your friends. So if there is a reason you are canceling, if you are now starting to realize and you can understand why you might be doing it, then you might be able to have a conversation with them, right? And so that is being self-aware, kind of like with flakies, they might do a running list of what's going on in the friendship. You can do a running list on what's going on with yourself. Kind of like what I was doing. Like, I was like, okay, I missed an episode. It happens. I forgot about the virtual party, and I'm like, why is that? So maybe part of my thinking of this is where the episode came from. They always say research is me search, right? That we are trying to figure ourselves out and other people. Second, focus on some questions, even further questions, right? Is there an issue across the board? Like, is this something that you do with everyone? And so that, again, might be your annoying quality about yourself that you need to be more self-aware about. Or is there a particular person that happens with? And so maybe there's something specific that needs to be addressed with a specific friend. And then there's other things that could be going on. Are you in a new relationship? Are you at a new job? Are you, those sorts of things. And really considering if you are helping yourself be balanced across your relationships. We always talk about like work-life balance, which I think is really hard to achieve. I think it's more about work-life management. And I think this is the same thing, that we need to manage our relationships as well. We need to maintain them. So not only thinking about being self-aware that we could be hurting our friends, we need to be self-aware about what might be specifically going on. If is it the particular person, if it's all the people, is my life in balance or out of balance? And then the third thing, flakers, is be responsible and apologize for behaviors. Own up to what you've done. Friends, I flaked on you last week, and I'm sorry. We will have a more consistent schedule, and if I'm not going to have an episode, I'll be sure to let you know on social media, right? Those are the things that we can do. Take responsibility, own up to what you've done, because that is the first step of being able to perhaps, mend some relationships that might have been hurt by flakiness and canceled plans. And in some cases, the articles talk about, well, if they don't show up on time or they cancel on you for Friday night event, what if they bail out on you when you really need them? And although I think that there is a correlation there, I don't think that's always the case. I still think that some friends, even though they might cancel plans, if the next week you're like, I'm having an emergency, would be like, I'm on my way, right? So I do think, although they might overlap in some way, that they are two distinct situations, right? And so, but that might be how people perceive you as a flaker, is that you can't be trusted, you're not reliable, you're not organized, you don't take care of your responsibilities, going back to that nasty reputation, that negative view that we have on flakiness, which can be fully earned, right? So the last thing that flakers can do, and I think this might be even beyond being self-aware and owning up, this could really save a lot of perhaps hurt and rejection and problems later. And that's being honest from the start, if you know what's going on with yourself or what's going on, right? It's that you don't always have to say yes. And if you're like, it's the end of the semester and I haven't looked at my calendar for what May looks like, let me know. I'll look at it and I'll text you. Right? Be upfront about it. Like, I don't know what my schedule looks like, or I think that's the weekend I'm going this place, or, and that can be really hard in quarantine because we're not going anywhere, right? Some states are reopening and other states are not. So if it's something like, I'm really kind of stressed out and anxious about everything that's going on in the world, I don't think I can do this weekend. Could we talk about another weekend? Even something like that shows your friend that you what's going on with you, which I'm sure they would love to know and want to know so that they can help you in any way they can, but it also lets you let them know that that's not going to work for you so that you don't have to cancel on them. So maybe that's the space where we need to be in. We need to be in the space with our friends where we can be honest about our interests, passing on events. Thanks for the invite. That's not going to work. I'm stressed out right now. I already have plans to do some tasks at home. Could we choose a different day? All that is going to help the friendship grow, because cutting people off and rejecting them and flaking on them, it doesn't allow the relationship to grow. So here's the thing. Flakiness is annoying, and we often let it slide because they're our friends and we think that they will always forgive us. And we are busy, but maybe too busy makes us forget to not be busy for the things we actually should be doing. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Sometimes we're so busy, being busy that we forget we need other things in our life to relax and to enjoy and those sorts of things. And it can be so easy to cancel because our cell phones are practically attached to us at all times. So let's give our friends the benefit of the doubt, show compassion, and be creative in our solutions if we've been flaked on. But we also need to remember that if we continue to flake on our friends, we might not have any more plans, we might not be invited anymore, and we might not have those friends anymore either. So keep these things in mind. So until next time, friends, show compassion to your flaky friends, but also try to decrease your flakiness, because without our friends, who would we be? For listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Ghost stories are always scarier when they're told by the very people who experienced them. I'm Becky.
And I'm Diana.
And we're the hosts of the Homespun Haints podcast.
We talk to people just like you who've come face to face with ghosts, demons, haints, and other strange paranormal phenomena. All of it makes for a chilling good time.
So grab yourself a sweet tea, turn off the lights, and listen to some eerie, true ghost stories on Homespun Haints.
I'm not scared. Are you?